Analyze the section was very particularly like using how perception works. I'm not very familiar with that. Also, I'm gonna shut the door. It shouldn't be maybe like limit meters like so
I promised that we will be talking about AI at some point, and the point has arrived, but not quite. It is in the title, but for this and the next lecture, it will take a little bit of time to get to AI. There is quite a lot of work to be done in the background, and part of that is because the problem that we are facing is pretty complicated. There's a lot of press, comments, discussion, plenty of sort of blogs and so on the impact, usually negative, of AI on democracy. I will touch upon that, but that is not really the topic. The joke is that if you read it in The Economist, that is not research, that's called news. This is not a newsroom, so we will not be covering the usual things that we will be able to find in newspaper in general. Then it makes our task a little bit more difficult because we need to dig quite deeply in terms of where the problem with current democracy is, and then understand where AI can make a difference, and then put things together. That in a context where we are also going to rely on what I sort of sketch outlined in the last two lectures. So if you remember, very quickly, when you look at the so-called methods of abstraction, the level of abstraction and so on, we're going, of course, not in as many words. It's not there every time then I'm going to warn you that abstraction. We're going to use that. In other words, we're going to look at the system, democracy, from a perspective that privileges relations as opposed to substance. If this doesn't mean anything to you, that's because you missed the last two lectures, and I'm so sorry, because the rest will be really obscure. I mean, it's already obscure, but without having the first couple of episodes, incomprehensible. I think the only solution is to have more pizza and just pretend you're not paying attention. And that's, for example, an hour or so. And have a show again. But in the all checks that what I'm saying is makes some sense. Remember, we will look at democracy as a system. We're going to try to understand how best to model that system. But one thing that we're going to do is to insist, even if inevitably, because I'm a Malian using this language, I'm going to be talking about things as opposed to relations, to property of things as opposed to processes. Remember, that is not the intention. The intention is to focus on a ontology of the model that is relational. Good luck. Having said that, therefore, we have a complicated issue. We want to dig as deeply as possible to understand how a technology that we are here around is very badly understood, deals with a complicated issue with a methodology that it should help, but it's not easy either. On top of all this, there's another element to be kept in mind for today and next Monday. I'm going to treat AI as a form of agency. More on this if there is a chance, but it will take a little bit of time and suspension of belief, so to speak. If you disagree, that's perfectly fine. So I'm not happy, but so be it. But if you disagree, that's fine. It's understanding that it's a step, not like being on the same page. There's a chair here. Don't have to be on the floor.
Oh, this shirt.
Oh, yeah. Besides food on the floor, the best idea, no? Two chairs in one there, so one here. No, yeah, well, someone was here. All right, so I tried to organize everything into 2 blocks, one for today, one for next time. We'll see how it goes with time. These are the steps it will take. There will be a bit of an introduction, as usual, warming up. Then I will introduce 3 short or kernel or essential or core theories. One about what we mean by power, what we mean by democracy, what we mean by AI. So once you have these 3 pieces on the board, I think we can play more easily. Again, no need to agree, essential to understand. Then I'm going to be quite quick on AI direct impact. Anyone publishing a book these days, I just got one as a free gift, we'll talk about that impact. Disinformation, manipulation of public opinion, how important it is to have informed citizens. Like, are we recording this? I never remember. Are we?
Yes.
Yes, so I need to be so careful. So awfully careful. But if we didn't record this, yeah, I think I would express my disappointment more robustly. It's not that it's wrong, it's just it's so shallow. Yeah, thank you. Obviously, it's clear to anyone who can think for 5 minutes. It's what you get if you ask ChatGPT or Claude, as we refer to. Look, what are the problems between AI and democracy? Manipulation of public opinion, disinformation. No, job done? No, that's the beginning of the job. Is there anything deeper than that? Can we scratch the surface? That's the rest of the block, and that's probably next Monday. So, the introduction. So this was meant for someone else, but this is not advertised, but this is what you can find probably, especially on the dark web, download this for free. Do not buy these things, but anyone wants to know where the ideas come from, it's from these 2 books, published in 2023, Dominion and Global Ethics of Artificial Intelligence. The introduction. So this is the Global Democracy Index 2023. Even for those of you too far away, the good color is deep blue, and I mean deep blue. The kind of deep blue that you find in Sweden, UK, I found they knew about Labour elections, Australia, etc. You don't find that in the United States, you don't find that in Italy. That is already a little bit on the flow of democracy. Then it gets to hybrid, then it gets to authoritarian regimes. Just looking at the colors, democracy is not doing well. The very idea that democracy is the natural place where things go if you let them go, it's a fallacy. Always been, always will be. Democracy is pushing the stone uphill. You let it go, it will go down back to well, being recorded kind of president of the United States. Yeah. So once you get that, you will also understand why some major disasters in some current democracies, there are no exceptions. I have been to more meetings than I can possibly remember where people will say, what happened in UK, for example, since US, going to be nice, on the other side of the Atlantic, one of the greatest democracies, an exception. It derailed. The history should not have gone down that road. Like populism, Brexit, so one prime minister after the other, not knowing which one is worse, and kind of regretting the previous one. So, no, the part of the sort of presentation today will also be an attempt to explain that that is where democracy goes if you let it go. So it's as Aristotle would have said, is a natural place. They had this theory, especially Aristotle onwards, that the reason why stones fall is because that's the natural place on Earth. And why things sort of go up in the air like a flame, well, because that's the natural place. The natural place of a social organization is not democracy. It's some kind of whoever's the power, exercise it as much as possible with going away as much as possible, lack of accountability, power. So, and it's, well, just more normal, so quote unquote. I know it's a bit of a Hobbesian view of the world, and we also have a Socratic view of the world. More on this maybe in the future. Otherwise, we can be a bit more optimistic. But this is the way we look at democracy these days. This is also a global index. It's a bit dated. It's still 23. So as you know, things change dramatically. Towards something. Thank you. Media, they do a good job. It's quite reliable, and actually the top 20 hasn't changed much. There is no overlapping, quite naturally, between where democracy is doing well and where AI is being developed. Or vice versa. I mean, the two things, as you can tell, the two maps are quite independent of each other. This is 2024. We're almost through. Has been for the state of the world election day or election year. Never before, all of a sudden, there was a magic synchronization of AI everywhere, democracy not doing well in many places, and people voting. Now, voting doesn't mean democracy, so a vote, quote unquote, in Russia, but it does mean expressing your view in some lots of people, and including India, where a big chunk of the population lives. There's another chair here. Then you know that this is where AI, in the trivial sense, could have done and has done a lot of damage. Okay. Now, for anyone who could come on time, you may not, for lots of reasons, but if you can, that's a good idea. Okay, so that's the background. Lots of crisis, more of this, where democracy is doing well, not much, impact, etc. So, in order to progress in our little game, understanding the impact of AI on democracy, we need to understand these kind of three things: power, AI, and democracy. I'll spend a little bit of time on this, and I discovered, discussing with colleagues, there was a special issue on that Green and Blue. The journal organized a set of comments on the book and replies on my site. I discovered with my surprise that some of the things that I thought were trivial were controversial. It helps not to have a sense of what is trivial and controversial in order to be innovative. Sometimes you just jump in thinking, well, everybody thinks that, right? Not apparently not. So the kind of three things I'm going to tell you here might actually not be as trivial as I think they are. If you find them trivial, well, welcome to the club, because I do think they are trivial. If you find them controversial, well, there's a large group out there. So, not the right place where to explain what a kernel is, and so we'll skip that. No, so basically core as it can be. And we're going to do power, AI, and democracy. So power, this is not a very new idea. Those of you in political science or have sniffed anything like Introduction to Philosophy or Politics, there is a super classic analysis by Schmidt that a long time ago taught us that when politics emerged as a science, it needed its own vocabulary. Now, sort of semantic borrowing has happened all the time, but at that time, let's say Hobbes and people like Hobbes had to look around and say, well, I need to talk about this new thing that doesn't exist, the science of politics or the philosophy of politics, and how do I speak about power, if not in terms of whatever discipline I found around myself that talks about power. Now, at the time, the discipline that spoke about power was theology. So, as Schmidt reminds us, there was plenty of borrowing from theology in terms of vocabulary that would provide the level of abstraction at which to analyze power, systems, interactions, conflicts, resolutions, etc. So what I'm doing here is not particularly new, which is the following. In order to understand power, I think the easiest way is to follow the same pattern and try to understand power in terms of the most powerful thing you can possibly imagine. The most powerful thing you possibly imagine is God, and God is omnipotent. So if you understand omnipotence, anything else is a little bit less than that. Now, omnipotence comes in these three features. Not that anyone has said that before, but it's quite understandable. First of all, you have the power to create something out of thin air, which is a lot of power. There might be so much power that in theology doesn't really cover many gods. Depending on your religion and when you were born, your God may not be as omnipotent as the Christian God. The Christian God is that power. Nada, like zero and boom, something. Most of the Greeks, for example, would consider that inconceivable. For the Greek, power was the second kind. There is something out there, whatever there is, and you transform something into something else. Anything into anything else. That's already a lot of power. That is the first one. So the power of creation or destruction, something becomes nothing, and you generate something from nothing. Call it poietic. We met this a little bit in the past, especially last year. Greek making. Then you have manufacturing power. Of course, not in the sort of industrial sense, but in the sense of transforming something into something else. Oh, something is not clear, just tell me, just don't point at it. I heard this before. Manufacturing means transforming something into something else. Now, in this case, you can transform, say, so you produce a stone out of nothing. Well, fiat. And there will be light. So a stone. Then you transform a stone into a bird. Well, that's power. The third one is power of control. That's another Greek word. The fact that you heard about cybernetics is because Wiener borrowed that term from Greek in terms of control, theory of control. Cybernetic is also the Kubernetes. We covered this in the past. Is the pilot of the ship. Who knows the winds, knows the stars, knows where to go, etc. So that is also other kind of power. It's not the power to create, it's not the power to transform, it's the power to control the behavior of something. So you produce a stone, you transform the stone into a bird, and you tell the bird to go there and back and sing and stop, whatever you want for the bird to do, control the bird's behavior. These three powers are all the power there is. Now, there might be a very high level and a very low level of this power. At some point, if you read Descartes will tell you that we have, when it comes to the exercise of wanting to do something, like either in terms of creation, we have as much power as God. People think this is insane. No, the difference is that your power is the power, beams of electricity, of turning one light on and off. God turns on the whole universe, or on and off. No, that's a big switch, but switch it is. So back to us. What kind of power are we talking about when we talk about socio-political power? Is mainly control. It's not so much creating, although one could squeeze some creation there in terms of making legislation, law making for a reason, or policy making for Yeti. The truth is that law regulations they're there not to make things happen out of thin air, but to control who does what, when, how, where, blah, blah, blah. And of course, manufacturing, etc., is also part of the business. But if you were to put one of these three things as this is power, this is political power at its sort of strongest possible sense, is to control the behavior of your citizens, for good or bad, depending on you are the ultimate Nazi or a very gentle Democrat. So, social power, mainly cybernetic, is control. This control, you can imagine, in case you are not convinced, a battle between gods. Imagine there are gods with equal powers. Which god is going to win? The one that creates stuff, or the other creates stuff. The one that transforms something into something else, well, that also can do that. But the one who controls the behavior, well, that's the real god. It's also called Cold War. The power between, it could be Sparta or Athens, it could be Rome and Carthago, it could be Soviet Union, United States, whatever. who controls whom, you know, I mean, these days, you don't have to be reminded what's happening in Gaza. Who is controlling everything, including walkie-talkie? Then you know exactly who is controlling what. That's power. So the God who controls the other wins. In not necessarily the best God or the good God, it's just the one who has more control over the other. That's why control is the essence here. So from now on, when we speak about power, we're going to talk about control. Such ability to control, influence people behaviors through creation and control of other stuff. So I'm going to use the other forms of power as means to an end. But your end is controlling behavior. You might need to create, for example, a fleet or an industrial policy, or you may need to transform something into a desert. Whatever it takes, control is the ultimate end. Now, in the past, what we have seen in terms of power, controlled by creation, controlling something, has been exercised in terms of creation, control, etc., of either things, goods, services, or information about things. I'll tell you a little bit more about this because it's a long story and it's not for today. But if you look back in terms of not only power as control, but who controls the controllers, which is the question sometimes in terms of grey power, the power behind the power. You start wondering about who controls the politicians. And if you look at, for example, the history of the United States, we can quickly go through, say, politicians, simplifying, but any power that controlled political power was power that had a formal control over stuff. Mines, railways, oil, that was the power. You had that kind of power, then you could influence the power that controls the behavior of the citizens. That moved quite quickly from stuff to information about stuff. So it was no longer who owned, say, and put it dramatically, is no longer the car industry that is influencing Washington. Is actually people who have information about cars, for example. At some point, I know I'm on record, so take this. I have a bad memory, so I think I can't remember. You will correct me. At some point, Bezos bought the Washington Post. Is that right? Yeah. You remember the Washington Post is the scandal, famous Washington Post. So Watergate is when you realize that people who really have power over controlling political power are people who control information. Now, who owns now the source of information? One step behind. Those who control questions, basically. Not the production, not the actual information, but the production of information. So imagine you have several steps. This political power that controls citizens' behavior. Behind that power are people who control other variables. Long time ago, land, say the aristocracy, oil, gold, railway stuff. Then it became more information about stuff, newspapers, the feast estate, etc. And then today is not even information, but those who allow the production of information. There's more power in the hands of Google, Amazon, etc., than in the hands of car industry. The day the car industry went to Washington and said, you have to bail me out, well, the relationship of power has completely changed. So these days, the control of controllers is exercised by control over the means of production of information. Sounds a little bit like Marx, but it's a bit sort of updated, but that's the idea. You don't control the means of production, full stop, or those were the days he was talking about the Industrial Revolution. It's just that we took several steps back. Now, at that point, in liberal societies, and that's the summary, if you have cheap goods and free information, it's not by controlling goods and information that you're going to control the controllers to control the behavior of citizens. You need to have something in the back. So power is exercised about which questions can be asked, and answers can be received. Now, if that sounds also what exactly happens in terms of production of AI systems, well, welcome to the real world. If I am the interface between you and whatever sort of bot you can use in order to ask which questions and what answers to get, well then, who is exercising real power here? Any discourse of empowerment of the user, please. Right? The real power is in the hands of the production of the means, etc., etc. Now, this also explains why until recently, the controllers of the means of production of information, the Microsoft, the IBM, were on a journey of aristocracy control of quote-unquote digital land, quote-unquote, if you get my meaning now. The AI has changed this quite dramatically, not in terms of kinds of power, but in terms of who has that kind of power. So all of a sudden, Google finds itself so wrong-footed because a search engine might be history in a matter of many, many months. Now, it hasn't happened, it may not happen, there are many more mixed scenarios, but you can tell that this is not just a matter of business, but also the ultimate source of control of the ultimate kind of power. 21st century. In the future, we'll see other things. The other thing that is worth stressing is that at this level of abstraction, not the only one, the one we have privileged today, transparency, privacy, right to be forgotten, freedom of speech, ownership right, etc., they can all be seen in terms of exercise of power, in terms of control of the means of production of information. Let's say, forget one more than bias. Bias emerges as a problem in a context where some actors have control over the means of production of information called, say, an AI interface, a bot, whatever, which has been trained on data, etc. So the bias at that point needs to be seen as part of the book on power in the 21st century. Not the only level of abstraction, but the one we're privileging here. So this is to say in a single sentence, which will impress, I used that in the past to impress Kia. It was a long time ago. So, what are you working on? Well, of course, the new morphology of power is the morphology of uncertainty. Sky. Let me get a coffee. So uncertainty here is quite simple. We did this in the past, but I'm going to redo it again. Information, as in, there are three kinds of information. I'll be quick. Information asks something, you find a pattern in the world, we don't care. Okay? Rings of the cut tree, forget about it. There's information for something. Algorithms, music, a recipe. It cannot be true or false. It either works or it doesn't. But never, no one in his right mind is going to have an epistemic, alethic assessment, just to be precise. Alethic, Greek word for truth. An assessment in terms of true or false of a recipe. A trend recipes cannot be true or false. Works, doesn't work, is correct, incorrect, accurate, inaccurate, but it's not. It does or does not match its reference. Then you have the third kind, which is what we call normally semantic information. Basically, someone asks you what you had for breakfast this morning, you say, cappuccino, okay? Focus on semantic information. Semantic information, having that from now on, that's information because it's the queen of the three. So information, as such, means that you can decouple or unzip any information. Now you know semantic, the factual, the what you have for breakfast kind of thing, into two blocks. One is a question, then the answer. So I read down. This morning I had cappuccino for breakfast. Becomes, which is imagine true, a piece of information about my breakfast. Becomes, what did Luciano have for breakfast this morning? Question plus correct, relevant answer, cappuccino. Or to put it simply, Paris is the capital of France. What is the capital of France? Plus Paris, there's an information. Are you with me? You can do that even further. You can reduce everything to 0 and 1s by making it, is Paris the capital of France? Question mark, yes or no. Now, there is a famous mathematician, another century, that actually said that there is a perfect number made of all the 1s and 0s, which provide all the yes and no answers to all the semantic information you can ever want to have, is an infinite number. As long as you have all the questions in the universe in the right order, you have yes, no, and that's the ultimate encyclopedia. So Wikipedia is getting close to a long list of 0s and 1s. If you didn't get that, it's because I was doing it too quickly, but it doesn't matter. Look, my hands, go back. So forget about that. Information, question plus answer. What happens if I have only the question but no answer? I have uncertainty. Oh, by the way, what happens if I don't even have the question? I have ignorance. I said in the past, education is moving from ignorance to uncertainty. No, as some people think, uncertainty to information. Well, a chatbot, Wikipedia, but knowing what questions to ask, that is you, all you. So forget about the moment about education, from ignorance, I don't even have the question, to I have the question, what is the capital of Paris? It already means that you're already thinking in terms of countries and capitals. Back to the sentence, the morphology of power is the morphology of uncertainty. Uncertainty means having the questions without the answers. So the morphology or the form of uncertainty is exactly what power controls. Make sense? Everybody doesn't dare to say no, thank you. So that is where we are today. The old morphology of power was the morphology of other things, was the morphology of information at some point, was the morphology of means of industrial production, etc. But you get how we're moving here. So in mature information societies, those who control the questions shape the answers, and those who shape the answers control reality. That's where you want to be. That's your Google, Amazon, Zuckerberg, Sam Altman, anyone would like to be there. Control the questions. If you control the questions, you control everything else. You control the narrative, you control who can answer what, when, where, in what way. Do I turn off all the satellites of this world? Well, those are all questions, so they will never be answered. Now, this should definitely sound like 1984. If it doesn't sound like 84, you haven't read your Orwell, please go back, that's a classic. And I refuse to think that that is an age kind of related piece of knowledge, okay? So that is, like the Blues Brothers, that's a reference to another conversation. Like the Blues Brothers, which again, you should know about, is something that we consider a classic. So clearly this is where we are, and that's the end for power. That was the Kendall theory. Now we need another step into AI. We're doing so badly. So because we are here, and because lots of you come from background where you could teach me endless lessons on this, which by the way could be a good idea as soon as I get some time. This is a quick summary, not to embarrass myself, also because we are on record. For those of you who don't know much about AI, AI has gone through, as a discipline, many ups and downs, but above all, many different stages. One, which we have just, is possibly the most significant of all, not because we are going through it, but because it looks like a completely different game. For a long, long time, when I was teaching this stuff back in Oxford, Prolog, for example, for some of you, the difference between AI and mathematical logic was a matter of who was teaching what, for what course, basically. But it was mathematical logic applied to problem solving, engineered in order, but it was deduction, deduction, deduction. It was if, then, otherwise, go, looping, and so on. So it was all about matter of logic. In fact, Minsky, famous MIT, one of the founders of AI, etc., had a whole long discussion with some other people when neural networks emerged to prove that they were completely useless. That's AI against AI. No, there was an internal fight. It was the mathematical logic, the symbolic, step by step, that was going to win the game. Now, at the time, and we're talking decades ago, it seemed to be an easy battle to win. Essentially, you could prove logically already in the 90s that neural networks were logically equivalent to anything that an AI symbolic system could do. But that was like in theory. Now, in theory, there are lots of things that can happen. Now, normally, especially in computer science, we don't take in theory or proof by contradiction. In other words, you don't prove that P by showing that not P is impossible. The reason why you don't do that is, which is classic in mathematics, and actually that's always been, Euclidean geometry is full of those proofs, is because you want to know how to go from P to the demonstration of P step by step. Thank you so much, but if you tell me that P is the case by showing that not P is the case, I still don't know how to get P. That's why, in the mathematical background of any decent computer scientist is constructionist. Completely confusing, but you need to know. It's also called, back in philosophy mathematics, intuitionistic, which has nothing of intuitive about it, not even screen. It's an old story. Back to us. The fight got the symbolic people winning the day at the time. What was missing at the time, and we're talking really, at least when in my own experience, we're still in the 90s. In fact, this was still the case at the end of the 90s. So we're talking 30 years or so ago. What was missing at the time were not the algorithms, calling algorithms is a bit confusing, not the theory behind the neural networks. Of course, we didn't have, say, what we have today, attention, for example, and other things. But roughly speaking, especially thanks to some Canadian research, the theory of neural networks was quite clear. We didn't have the computational power. We didn't have the statistical sophisticated tools. We didn't have the data, and we didn't have the money or resources that 30 years later became abundant. Tons of data, computational power as much as you want, sophisticated statistical tools to make neural networks work in terms of deep learning, and today, the sort of large language models. End of the story. If you have enough money, you're going to get it. Now, it's not an accident that, therefore, we move from AI as a branch of logic to AI as a branch of statistics only recently, just a few years ago. I still remember when DeepMind was a startup, literally, like a couple of guys in London trying to make it. So in that context, we move from deduction to association. And that is the sort of essential, again, kernel issue. It's no longer about deducing from principles or from axioms your conclusion constructively, by the way, not by proof, indirect proof, but directly. It is a matter of relating through layers, increasingly complex, a bunch of data to whatever those bunch of stuff is related to. If you want to learn four-legged animals or cat or cancer, or translate one language into another, which is, as you know, is how the large language models were able to emerge in the first place. So back to us. This is what happened in the last few years. Roughly by now, it's a decade or so, depending on where you put your threshold. But it's not decades. As I said, in the late 90s, we were still talking in terms of AI as a matter of mathematical logic. A footnote to this: we gain in this transition something amazing, the power that we have today. The power to have content produced with 3 lines of a script, video, text, pictures, is extraordinary. The power to mine data at a level that is extraordinary, execute, control, etc., etc. So the power of these things just skyrocketed thanks to statistical analysis. What we lost, inevitably, was certainty. The certainty of knowing exactly where and how every step is taken. In the old system, it didn't matter how long it was going to be, but there were lines of code. At some point, some lines check and maybe fix, not in a statistical context. Of course, therefore, what we gain together with the power is, say, some uncertainty, also called as hallucinations. Now, anyone who doesn't get this picture and thinks that one day we're going to fix the hallucinations, like, it's in the nature of the thing. The only way of fixing hallucinations are provably 100% is to go back to some deductive logical system. Now, better stop elaborating on this slide, but one more note is that there have been attempts, and interesting attempts. In fact, anyone wants to write a technical paper on that, I would be very curious to know and write a review on using deductive systems to control statistical systems. One classic thing is that you cannot use current things for the foreseeable future, not for now, but given the science that we're developing in terms of AI, any mission critical application is not subject to large language models. You just cannot, unless you're insane. Nuclear power, okay? Or an airplane landing system, etc. You want to have what in computer science called formal methods. You want to be able to prove that that piece does exactly what it says, nothing more, nothing less. It may stop working, but that's a different story. It just breaks. But not that every now and then there is, just a chance in a billion that it might go boom, boom. Well, I don't like that chance in a billion. No, nothing. It has to be provably correct. You don't get that in a statistical system. So, as anyone wants to do the technical paper on how deductive systems can be put on top of statistical systems, just to simplify. So, symbolic AI with Gen AI, imagine one on top of each other to generate the best of both worlds. Give me a ring. So what happened is that, and this is something that many of you have already heard several times, so I'm going to be, if I can, quick on this. In this sort of transition, as I said, we acquired an enormous amount of power in terms of what we can do, and success. Some people have started thinking that the success was due to the fact that we are generating an intelligent system. Now, that is a natural explanation. It also sells very well. So inevitably, it seems intuitive. It sells well. What's wrong with it? Well, it's just false. Well, unfortunately, we're not generating anything that is remotely intelligent, like not my watch. So what we are creating are statistical systems that have a very successful ability to solve problems or take care of tasks autonomously, learning by, in terms of their output, and in view of a goal. That's called machine learning. So machine learning is incredibly successful, yes. But how can it be incredibly successful if it's completely idiotic? Normally, the two things don't go hand in hand. If you do something at intelligence zero, normally you get a disaster. You don't get extraordinary success. It doesn't happen. So scratch your head, and your philosopher comes up with a intuition that, well, what has happened is that we have been adapting the world to these machines. That's why they are incredibly successful. Their power is matched by a reorganization of whatever environment they're working in to such an extent that their power can be exercised. A simple example, and then something more, is driverless cars. Driverless cars can work only if the network is actually doing something decent. Now, network and your driverless car is a piece of junk. In fact, actually, the real true driverless car, the level 5, doesn't even have a wheel, doesn't have pedals, accelerate, nothing. So it becomes a box worthless if the network is gone. It's because of the network that becomes a node in the network works, the driverless car is fantastic. So the real thing here is that we have actually divorced intelligence and agents. So by moving, there were a few basic choices that we had to make. If we wanted to stay on the path of certainty, mathematical certainty, we would not have had the power, we would not have been able to sort of detach the ability to do all that from any need to be done. we have that, we have lost the certainty, the reliability of that degree. This is obvious in driverless cars or other contexts like that. Now, this is Ocado, if you can read it, and normally, I'm not sure whether, I'm going to show you something else in a moment. This is a big chain in UK. It's not just because UK. It's a good example because the business of Ocado, which is just a retailer, think of Stop and Shop, okay, Costco. It's because now they make money, especially by implementing their warehousing technology. The warehousing technology, as you can tell from this picture, but I'll show you something in a moment, is very smart. They rebuild the whole environment around the robots. You don't build robots to fit the environment. You change the environment to fit the robots. You re-ontologize the environment to make sure that artificial agency is successful. Anyone understand that? The future is yours. You don't get it, you waste an enormous amount of money. There is a beautiful example, not just mine, and I don't want to badmouth people, are not here to defend themselves, but it's YouTube anyway. Walmart. Walmart spent millions trying to build robots that would work within their shops. They never changed the shops. They tried to build robots that would work in it. Never worked. They should have asked enough lots. That's what it was for. So you must have seen, especially companies, a company that is owned by Elon Musk, advertising new Androids that do this, Androids that do that. Long story, I don't think I have the slides here to make fun of the Android that does some ironing. That is pathetic. It was also discovered that actually there was a guy behind actually maneuvering it. It was like, so Elon Musk had to send another tweet. So, oh, no, sorry. What I mean was like, yeah, there was a fake as it happens. Not only that, but I think for some of you, we had another lecture in other context. If you check, we have had Androids being able to do some ironing for many, many years. Madrid, Carlos III, colleagues there did that, robots. And they stopped there because that's not the point. If you get it, if you get what I'm saying, and if I'm right, of course, in better order. If I'm right and if you get it, then it's not about building Androids. Driverless cars are not cars as we know them, plus a robot driving them instead of us, like a humanoid. Not the way. So this shows now visually, of course, robotics is much easier. You can visualize bits of data. But this is how you collect strawberries, and I use this more a few times, so forgive me. There's plenty. So if you look at this, what strikes you is you have reorganized the whole strawberry fields around the robot. You don't have androids checking around, like smelling, putting in a basket, beautiful, 2 legs, 2 arms. That is sci-fi, but we're stuck with that imagination. If you want to build a startup, this is how you collect strawberries today. Not by having androids in the world. Not going to happen, right? Because someone else is going to do it this way, and this competition will be unbeatable. So androids might work, but this is the warehousing is nothing in Europe. If you look at, and it's a real example again, if you look at the space, this space has been built for the robots. It's totally insane. I mean, no one would do and move things around like this. But this is very convenient, and the human is behind the barrier. That space is not for that human being. In fact, it has to be slightly protected to make sure that, no. So one thing that, for example, when Walmart had those robots, people complain is that, and I can stop here, otherwise we're never going to get to democracy. They were testing this robot in a scenario where the space between the shelves was huge, like this huge. Now, have you ever been to a Walmart? You barely move. Of course, it's downtown. Space is at a premium. You try to use as much space as possible. So 2 people going through, this is as much as you want to allow. Now, then they realize that if you are in that particular corner of the shop and there's a robot coming towards you, straight at you, like, you're not going to say, oh, I'm sure it's going to stop. Maybe. Now, what is the language modeling has an hallucination, etc., etc. You know, like the dog, oh, it doesn't bite. But what if he doesn't know that it doesn't bite? So, no, the owner, so he never bites with the dog. And so people were just going away, etc., etc. So this is the world. The analogy here, therefore, that is that these systems, like something like ChatGPT, but not anything else, due to language what calculator does with maths. It's a limited analogy. I've been just playing on this. Can't believe it. Oh, Professor Faraday, well, that is algorithmic deterministic. Well, thank you so much. You know, I just taught mathematical logic for 15 years. Thank you for the explanation. That was on record. Whoever, and you know who you are, try to explain to me that, yes, thank you. Of course, a pocket calculator is deterministic. That's why it's just an analogy, and it's limited to that. But with not many similarities, there is no database behind. We had to explain no longer, but in the past, to some policymakers who made serious decisions about the fact that they want to stop OpenAI and ask OpenAI to change the database because it was not GDPR compliant, the database. Right. And of course, OpenAI was very happy to go, yes, anytime. Here's the database, we can throw it away. There's no intelligence consciousness, despite the fact that if you were to show that pointer calculator to, say, a medieval poor guy, he would just think, he would look for a demon inside. Like, where's the demon? Because no one could do all those calculations without having intelligence. This was no understanding. And stochastic power, that's not a good metaphor. For those of you who actually read the paper, discussed the paper, for two reasons. First of all, because people forget about stochastic, and when that's the whole thing collapses. And also, poor parrot, that means way more intelligent. So I found that sort of analogy poor. Of course, they're not algorithmically deterministic and so on. But the same power, if you like, that we have now on numbers, we have it now on tokens / words / sentences / blah, 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 blah. It's extraordinary. I mean, their power changed humanity. So this power is going to change our future, as long as we get the right picture. So what are we talking about here? This comes from the past. If you look at the AI Act in red, it has this thing that actually we kind of lost in the way, thanks also to the OECD. On the left, for the purpose of this regulation, the following definition apply. The beauty of legislation is that it has to legislate on something, and because there's something needs to be defined, normally provides you at least with some understanding. They just can't go away. Oh, you know what I mean, but I'm regulating it. They can't do that. No. So they have to tell you what exactly they're regulating. And it says artificial intelligence systems means software that is developed with one or more of the techniques and approaches listed in Annex 1, and it goes on. Well, but the red bit is interesting. For a given set of human-defined objectives, human-defined. This stuff doesn't go around stealing your car and your car and card and going on holiday. Generates outputs such as content, prediction, recommendation, decision, etc. Now, look at the executive order on the other side. For a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real digital environments. There's something missing: content. So remarkably, the executive order was not about content. Now, if anything today strikes us as AI, the new thing, the Gen in Gen AI is Gen of what? Content. And if anything, for another day, but if this stuff is going to make a revolution, there is one of the corners that will never be the same, ever. How come the executive order forgot about that? Well, because that was taken straight away from the previous piece of legislation, which was about national security. So it wasn't like they wanted to omit it or they forgot about it. It was the level of abstraction. The level of abstraction of a defense document just couldn't care less about Gen AI producing a video. It's all about prediction, recommendation, decisions, influencing. We're talking weapons, we're talking defense, security, cyber attack, etc. So content wasn't really in the making. It was not at that, as I said, interface. So it never made it. Now, with great relief for anyone who's going to be affected by this, because of course, most of AI goes under content management anyway, so like they miss that completely. Speaking of level abstraction, again, I think some good philosophy would have helped once. So this is the picture, but of course the AI Act went on and on and on, and we lost bits. I don't want to bother you too much in terms of these, I said, just kind of. But trust me, as the AI Act was moving through legislation, it lost bits of clarity to a point where now you can see the third column, it became a real mess. We also lost some of the human design objectives, etc. Oh, and today the actual definition is quite a mess, to the extent that if you have followed the recent discussion of Meta, the letters signed by lots of people, etc. Okay, there are lots of things that are not convincing, but they have one, say, pinch of right point to sort of highlight. It's a mess. And for any company, messy legislation, it's problematic. You never know on which side of the divide you're going to find yourself. Is it going to be yes, no, am I outside the parameters? Okay, so that's enough for AI, democracy. This is another piece where we need to remove some old intuitions. Remember when we discussed level abstractions and the highlighting of how much we don't see, how much we don't hear, etc., etc. Okay, with that back in the background. I think a polite way of putting it is this is the story that at least was told when I was a kid. When you're a kid, someone at some point tells you, why do we have representative democracy? And someone says, oh, well, because we're so many, dear Luciano. You don't understand, but if we were a small place, just a few people, we could just all be involved. But it's a big place out there, so we need representatives. It's not a game that we can play. You just have to send some people, and they play. So that's the story. That's representative democracy. If you have that story in the background, and I'll tell you more in a moment, then the debate about what is a democracy, and remember the slide I showed you almost an hour ago, different levels of democracy, good democracy. Well, on what ground? Like, who decides what is a 100% democracy, a 75, a decent, okay? Well, of course, philosophers, we never agree on anything, including what democracy is like. And there are two camps, at least. One is more procedural oriented, and it will tell you that democracy is a matter of rules. Then we sort of disagree further down the road about which rules make a difference. But the other camp, as it were, so we don't agree even within our team, but the other team is the value team, the substantialist team. And they say, no, it's not about rules, it's about what values. Say, for example, fairness. It's not about rule of law, it's what kind of specific, we all want to be friendly, and equal, and etc. French kind of revolution style. So this rules versus values has been going on for some time. And I think that the people on the rules sort of side are winning the game. But it's an open debate to some extent. There's a third position which we introduce here, and it's called the Yale School, meaning the 25 people in this room. Instead of looking at rules or values, we take a step back and we wonder about power. That's why we have to introduce that. And we want to understand how democracy is, above all, a way of managing power. And then, we can have debate about rules and values, but deep down, it's about power. And we can call that structuralism because in a moment, I'll show you what that means in terms of dividing power. It sounds familiar in a way, but it resembles something that you have heard before. So we have these three positions: proceduralism, rules that are followed by democracy, substantialism, what values are being pursued, and structuralism, which is introduced in this room just for us. No one said so, but that's what philosophy is for. You need to do some innovation. What structure is implemented? Structure what is counted. Keep that in mind for a moment. Back to representative democracy. The idea here is to decouple, separate those who have power but don't exercise it, and those who exercise it but don't have it. They don't own it. If you can divide this, if you can separate those who have power, sovereignty, from those who exercise power but they own to exercise governance, so that is the ABC of any democracy. To the extent that if you don't get that, it doesn't matter what values and rules you have. Consider a very enlightened, wonderful, beautiful monarchy where the monarch is a real one, like tells you what to do, how to do it, when, etc. So the king or the queen, they have the power and they exercise it. It doesn't matter. I mean, they might be the kindest people in the world and implement all the values and rules in the world. I wouldn't consider that democracy. I have no power there, and should I disagree for whatever reasons in that context, well, that's my problem. Now, don't make that a king or queen, make that a party, an aristocracy, a group of people, a Nazi, dictator, whatever you wish. But when power, possession, and exercise are two sides of the same coin, that doesn't allow democracy to emerge. Should you be able to separate these two things, then for the procedural and the substantialist, there's a compromise. Because you immediately move into a representative democracy. Separate sovereignty and governance, and all of a sudden I have to have people who exercise power, but it's not their own, and they can be sent home. Vice versa, those who have the power don't exercise it. So mob rule, not at all. Majority rule, we do as the majority wants. Well, that's a mistake. That's not democracy. That's another form of dictatorship. Is, as the founding fathers of American democracy said, is the dictatorship of the majority. Still a dictatorship. So how do I smell a dictatorship? Power owned, power exercised in the same hands. Where is a majority? Two people, one, the president, a coalition. If they think for a moment that they own that power, if they don't recognize, for example, that they have lost the election, they're not thinking democratically. They think that it's my precious, I own it, you own that for me, and I exercise it when I want, if I want, etc., etc. It's like my watch. In other words, you don't have access to it. I can decide whatever to do with it. Now, whenever we're looking for the strong man, the strong woman, we're just giving up on democracy to begin with. We want to have someone who we delegate, like, it's yours. I can't take it anymore. It's your problem. It happens all the time. Look at what has just happened in Austria. And we are on record. Thank you, Austria. As if you hadn't done enough damage in the past. Unbelievable. I mean, the right wing dominating the elections in Austria, of all countries. I don't have to remind you who came from Austria. Unbelievable. And I'm glad we put this on record. So, for these two positions, representative democracy is a compromise, is a better than what I would really like, which is direct democracy. But for a structuralist like myself, it's the real thing. So a representative democracy is not a bug, it's a feature, it's exactly where you want to be. Meaning that you have representatives who don't have, own the power. They're there at the, if you even like, even a whimsical, but no, wish of other people who at the same time don't have it either. You make a mistake one way or the other, and you have dictatorship populism. But so you make one or the other mistake. Where did the whole story to poor little Luciano started? That is John Stuart Mill. It might not be the main culprit, but I think it's the most influential one. And in considerations on representative government, here we go. So, the only government, not well, that sense, not only philosophers, no, the only government which can fully satisfy all the exigencies of the social state is one in which the whole people participate. Nothing less can be ultimately desired than the admission of all to a share in the some power of the state. If you understood what I said before, this is a disaster. This is the ultimate end of any democratic forum. And then he continues. But since all cannot, in a community exceeding a single small town, participate personally on any but some very minor portions of the public business, it follows that the ideal type of a perfect government must be representative. It's a, if only that's okay. It's the second best. But the very, very best is some kind of mythical, never existed Athens in which we all know each other, we're all informed, we're all rational agents, we are informed, and we deliberate through a debate which is polite, intelligent, we change each other's minds, and we reach common consensus. Only a philosopher, because that never existed anywhere on planet Earth. They killed Socrates. That's the Athens, that's the real Athens, where only men able to pay for their weapons could actually be full Athenians. No women, no slaves, no foreigners. So let's calm down, first of all, with the idealized kind of world in the past. Second, to say John Stuart Mill, maybe this was a white lie. Maybe he knew. In other words, for those of you who don't know what a white lie is the following. Uncle John calls him and says that they are having a party at their house. And he says, I'd love to come, but unfortunately, my mom is not feeling well, so I cannot come. That's a white lie because she's perfectly fine. Now, that's John Stuart Mill. The following week, he goes back and said, I know your mom is perfectly fine. At that point, you have to go, because that was the only reason why you were not going. Now, your defense is gone. What is the second call here? Digital technology. That's exactly what happened a few years ago. Someone went back and said, we can do this. We can implement it. It doesn't take much. No, in fact, we have all mobile phones, etc. And in one go, and that happened in Italy, in the UK, in this country, in places where there was decent democracy, they said, well, we can have direct democracy. You said that we couldn't because it was just an accidental limit. Too many people. We didn't have the technology. You couldn't just go every day, vote. But now, pick up your phone and I can make you vote on every single decision at the city level, country level, state level, federal level. Click. Job done. And then poor John Stuart Mill, if he went alive, he would say, okay, you know what? It was a lie. It was not true. It was just a way of making you, who are not that smart, digest the structure, the rules, and the thing, and I couldn't give you a whole story. This was so much easier to sell, so much easier. Say, ideally, we should all click, but we can't therefore send the representatives. Truth is, that is the real deal. And when Uncle John calls again the second week and say, Mom is perfectly fine, you have to tell them it was a lie. A lie that we have all been told, basically, in order to sell representative democracy as a compromise, as a almost, but not quite. So at this point, and we're almost there, and I'll probably close here in a moment, we have power as control, AI as agency, democracy as separation between who has the power to exercise it. Could have said this in a couple of minutes, but all the pleasure, blah, 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 for an hour, it's like, that would have gone. But now you know what is behind these three boxes. There's much more, but roughly speaking, that's the story. What's the impact of AI on all this? I'll tell you about the direct impact, and then next Monday we do the real thing. So the bad impact is, of course, if you have this idea about powers control, etc., and democracy as separation between sovereignty and governance, is something wrong with the separation. If AI influences badly this nice thing of sovereignty on one side and governance, on the other, if it does short circuit that, well, you don't want to have AI. That's why it's quite trivial. how AI can have a bad impact on democracy. No separation, wrong allocation once you have the separation. Logic. No, 1, 2, 3. There are no other ways. No separation. Well, basically, AI doesn't allow this to happen. Autocracy, sovereignty, same thing. Sovereignty actually is a French-Italian word, which we have started using also in the Anglo-Saxon world, unfortunately. Basically, the idea that the nation, the state, is another form of subtle, quiet fascism, not crippling through. No separation. Autocracy is anything like Putin or China. Essentially, AI helps Putin, helps the Communist Party in China, or helps the populists to make sure that we don't separate. As you can tell, you can do that in many, many different ways. But AI is the sort of agency that enables the control of behavior that goes in the direction of not implementing the right kind of a separation between sovereignty and governments. I told you there were a lot of moving pieces, but that should be all clear. Sometimes it gets a bit crowded in your mind. Then there is a wrong kind of separation. So you do separate, but you separate in the wrong way. You just allocate and mislocate. Populism, cronism, again, forms that normally go hand in hand with the other stuff. How about an autocracy that plays on sovereignism that is also cronist and is also populist? Well, that's like, it's called Putin, like, it's called. Or you can do the wrong allocation. I spend a little bit more on this because that's also democratic deficit. That's why some countries on the old map that I showed you at the beginning are not on the full blue side. The crisis of sovereignty is a big deal. There's a completely different lecture for another day. We will not cover this in this sort of workshop. But when we speak about digital sovereignty, that is the little corner on this big sort of frescoes where we're putting our finger. Sovereignty normally is understood as the control by, say, whatever political power, say the state, within its borders of its own resources, including the behavior of the citizens, taxes, education, health, military, security, etc. Once you move into a digital world with cyberspace, etc., where a lot of this power is exercised by multinational, well, we have had a revival of the debate on sovereignty, which hadn't been with us for a long, long time. It's a very old, in political philosophy, is almost like a classic that you study at some point because you have to study, but it no longer has much sense. But today is completely lively because, of course, who has the final say about what needs to be done? Now, take Brazil and X, the current debate. Normally, when the state puts down its feet and says enough is enough, the company screams and then says that's okay, fine. Because ultimately, the power exercised within the borders on an analog world tends to be a little bit more convincing than the power they exercise on a digital world. Some time ago, that could be seen as a hardware turn towards exercise of power. But screen the company, it will. And so it might be Meta in Europe, X in Brazil. It could be, for example, the control of press in Australia or Spain by Google and Meta. Same debate, same story. Who controls what? Who makes the rules? Who needs to pay what? Etc. Etc. So wrong allocation of power there is what we are seeing under our eyes. And of course, AI can push things in the wrong direction. So loss of sovereignty and clear crisis of sovereignty. So in this sense, AI exacerbates the crisis of democracy. It doesn't generate it. And all the things that I told you before, there can also be counterparts. Well, we're still talking about the superficial kind of stuff that if you ask your ordinary Bob, you may or may not come up with something like this. In terms of separation, it could increase democracy. It could withstand the democratic deficit. In terms of good separation, it could increase pluralism. It could protect minorities. And the same forces, the same kind of tools, the same power of technology can also help us to allocate power in the right way. So not loss of sovereignty and proper digital sovereignty in the proper hands. When I say in the proper hands, it's all a matter of accountability, not good behavior. I mean, the best of the best of the best companies may just be, an angel for as long as we know, and as long as we live, and it's still not accountable. If anything goes wrong, that's the way it goes. Accountability means that we take their power back. We the people. That's line of the Constitution here in this country, which is one of the most beautiful way of starting a constitution. But I cannot imagine anything better. We the people. That's where the power lies. And we do this and we do this, and we send people to a state senate or the federal senate and so on representatives. That moment of reacquiring and distributing sovereignty is something that, as we speak, is under our eyes. The executive order was one way of reaffirming who controls what. Say, hello, this is the President of the United States. I think the agency should do X, Y, and Z. Now, that therefore leads to, again, at a very superficial level, to a context where AI mitigates the crisis of democracy. The crisis of democracy, I remind you, and we stop here, is what that initial map we saw. Democracy is not doing well, it's shrinking. More and more states are less and less democratic. It's not growing, it's going down. It's not a natural place for, a group of human beings where to be. It requires hard work. Roughly in the 90s, depending on how you see recent history, we lower our gap as democracies. From that time onwards, a few things went really well. Apartheid in South Africa, in no particular order because I cannot do that. The wall in Berlin, the Soviet Union, a decent government in Washington, Clinton administration, all that made the world think the worst is over. We turn a page. Never again. This is the end of history. That was the famous book. Now, of course, anyone who knew and knows history knows that there is no such thing. That it's always a fight. That if you lower the guard, the other force will prevail. And it did. It did here, it did in the UK, it did all over the world, and it's still doing it. Now, look at Austria and the revival of fascism in Europe. So we're not doing too well. Wake-up call is overdue. Understanding what to do is essential. But we stop here, because the next thing we want to see is, okay, well, thank you, but all this, no matter how complicated you make it, is quite tricky. A lot of pieces, but nothing that one would say like how possibly AI has impact on behavior, manipulation of behavior, manipulation of news, uninformed citizens being taken for a ride, and we'll see what happens at the end of these elections. But we need to look more deeply, and that's what we're going to do next Monday. Thank you. Okay.